Okay, episode 3 of the Unnamed AI podcast, formerly Asparagus AI, formerly Artificially Intelligent. We go by many names. I'm Matt. This is Ricky. So, what are we talking about today, Ricky?
So I had a couple interesting things that I wanted to talk about. A lot, actually. Probably we won't get to them all today, so we'll just start going down the list. The first is I saw some of those bastard developers who made it off the wait list for ChatGPT plugins, who started creating some cool stuff. So one of the people that I saw created a text-to-video AI, which I'm not sure exactly how that works. It's kind of the holy grail of content creation, in my opinion. You know, we have Midjourney, which is very good at text-to-image.
Right.
It's not that big of a far of a jump to go from image to video, but you need to sequence those. So I'm not sure exactly how this plugin works, but I do want to show you a clip of it working. Let me present my screen real quick.
Yeah, and before you do that, the thoughts around how this works are just like escaping me. I'm so curious to see exactly what this is going to look like.
All right, so we're gonna.
Hey everyone, using the new text-to-video AI plugin, you can now generate videos on ChatGPT.
So,
Let's
text to
test it
video
out.
AI is a
Say,
plugin.
make me a video of a panda eating bamboo.
Make me a video of a panda
It's going to
eating
automatically
bamboo.
use our plugin. And once it's done, it should give us a link to a video. Let's see what it comes up with. Okay, so far so good. Let's wait for this link to finish loading.
A cute panda eating bamboo as requested. And it generates a video, and I'm guessing it's hosting the video, or
I'm not. I think. So it showed a link, right? So it's being hosted on Replicate.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Interesting.
yeah, you can look at this, right? It's not a super. I'm gonna pause it right on the video.
And there you go.
It's not a super. Damn it. There we go. So it's not a super high quality. Like this image, it looks like as it moves in these few frames here, it looks a little bit distorted. You know, the
You
chewing
can see
structure.
the lack of detail in the grass there too. I don't know if you're seeing that, but like it almost looks like like a old school video game.
I think it's
like
actually. I don't think that's a mistake. I think it's these leaves. It's like bamboo leaves on the ground, not actual grass. Like it's a
But
little
do you
bit.
see how flat that looks? Like, wouldn't there be more shadow? And
Yeah, that's true. It does
maybe it's just what
almost
I'm
look.
seeing come across on my screen because it is so small.
No, you're right. It does look a little odd. You know, like there, for example, right here, there is sort of an edge of some pieces of bamboo that looks a little bit odd. You sort of have this like horizontal line, which looks
Yeah.
like a sort of break. But I would say, it's not ready for YouTube, but it is ready for memes, and I think that is like a real use case because memes are marketing nowadays. So if I can just, like that was a very simple prompt. We had create this
Hey everyone, using the
create this panda. Skip forward. Yeah, make me a video of a panda eating bamboo. That's such a simple prompt, and then to be able to get that little GIF. I think these are GIFs. Did it say in the link here?
I do wonder how complex that can get.
Or
Like what
MP4.
sort of prompts you can give it, and what data it's trained on to be able to generate this. I'd love to know how this is working under the hood.
Yeah, I'm also extremely curious how this is working under the hood. Basically, all we have is this, these couple tweets. This guy is a developer advocate at Replit, so he's just kind of pushing Replit. He's like, hey, we can host these things on Replit, getting a little bit of visibility there. But
There's
yeah,
a fork available there.
there's a what?
A fork available there underneath the next tweet says fork this template on Replit.
That it probably assumes you have access to developers. Yep, requires ChatGPT plugins developer early access, which we don't have, unfortunately.
If only I could pull some strings and get us that access.
Start pulling all those strings, go up, get in with what's the founder of Morning Brew's name?
Sam Altman.
Yes.
No. Morning Brew. No, I thought you were going to say OpenAI. The founder of Morning Brew is Austin Reef.
Yeah. So, just get up to him. I'm sure he, has some influence he could use to get early access, and then
I don't know that will be happening just because the first time I met him, I made fun of him being a Michigan fan because I'm a Notre Dame fan, and I don't think he appreciated that much. So I don't know how well that's going to work.
burning bridges from the get-go.
So I do that really well.
All right, are you ready for ChatGPT plugin number 2?
Please.
Number 2 is this.
All right, we have Stability GPT.
Yeah, so this is basically running stability diffusion based image generation directly within ChatGPT, which maybe I should have showed you this first because it's a little bit, less impressive than text to video, just text to image. But these are definitely higher quality images than the video was.
That is very detailed.
Yeah, so stable diffusion is not too bad, and just the ability to add, text to image and text to video within ChatGPT, I think, is incredible because you don't have to then go to something like Midjourney or anywhere else really. You can just do them directly within ChatGPT, which is awesome. You could have ChatGPT generate a script, think about, obviously the video is a little bit short right now, but if you had something that was longer, you could say generate a short form video script, generate the image, generate a thumbnail. That's pretty awesome. As it is, you could even mass produce memes for Instagram marketing. You just generate the images, generate the captions, produce 100 of them, use the Zapier plugin, and then just start posting those and going crazy.
So why would I want to use this versus a Midjourney or vice versa?
I think it's just more convenient, right? Midjourney is a little bit better, but the convenience of having both the text to image capability and the text generation capability in the same system gives you a lot of just easy use cases, right? Like you can literally, if I'm a marketer who's using Instagram and I'm trying to, do a mass build organic traffic for a particular Instagram page, I could say, hey, I'm going to build a theme meme page around a particular thing. So let's say finance, right? I want to build a finance meme page. Meme pages are a great sort of hack because you get a really expensive audience for not that much effort, right? If I want to attract a really affluent audience, I can write difficult to produce finance content, or I can produce memes about finance that are niche and only finance people will get, and that will attract the same audience for less effort. So if I want to do that approach, right, I'm selling some sort of finance product, I can create an Instagram meme page. I can then create a whole bunch of Instagram memes and captions. And right now, I could use Midjourney to produce a bunch of meme images. That's fine. There's no API for Midjourney right now. The only way to access it is through Discord. So I could sort of pipeline something together, API for Discord, and then Discord goes to Midjourney. But using a ChatGPT plugin that can just generate images, so Stable GPT, I could literally just use GPT to, I could say, hey, create 100 different ideas for memes about different finance topics, create those memes, create captions for those memes, and then for each of those, use the Zapier plugin to go post those memes or schedule those memes on some Instagram schedule poster. And then I could have, 10 memes per day for the next 10 days. And that all is done from a single GPT prompt, which is just that speed and the scalability of that is enormous.
The speed and scalability is fantastic, but I do worry about the quality, right? Where
For sure.
I think I've seen many memes, whether it's them trying to decipher what the the comedy in a meme is, or them creating their own memes where they just are not really that funny or really don't have a point in terms of how a human would view it. And so I think, you'd be able to automate a lot of that stuff, but without a lot of oversight, you're just going to be generating content that people are really going to know is AI generated, and I don't think we'll want to interact with. So I'm curious, what that looks like in practice. Do you have any sort of qualms against doing that, or
I do have the same concern that it may not be of a high enough quality, but I don't actually know how justified those concerns are. So I have seen both positive and negative examples. I've seen some examples of AI generated memes that are obviously not that good, but I've also seen a few examples of ChatGPT generated memes that are pretty good. And I think, if you're using, say, GPT-4, I really don't know. I feel like you could probably get quite a few good memes out of that. You might have to, maybe you want to give the prompt a little bit more information about what types of things to make memes about. But I still think you could do that and then sort of have a once you engineer that prompt, you can kind of rerun it again and again and again, and just get variations of that, and then have a ton of memes. And even if you have to throw out some of them,
Yeah.
you could review that and just be like, I like this one, this one, this one, this one, that one, throw out that one, like this one, throw out that one.
Well, I get scared of an automated pipeline, right? I think that there needs to be some sort of review process for you to decipher. Okay, this one it meets my criteria. It's up to the quality of or the standard of meme that I want. Because again, if you just like are posting, 3 memes a day, and maybe like 1 or 2 of those are good, people are just going to get saturated with content, even if they don't realize it's AI generated. They're just going to get sick of it, right? So I think there's some debate for like, I mean, I guess there's no debate that that is going to really speed up the workflow. If I could generate 50 or 100 memes, and then even if it's just giving me ideas to make my own, that's super valuable, right? So I do see the value in it, but again, I don't know. Maybe I'm just like a AI boomer, because there's a lot that scares me about that lack of oversight, or what I imagine people will do when they're able to just generate content like this on the fly.
So I guess my hypothesis is, one, I think there's a greater than 50% chance, if you spent the time to write, a properly detailed prompt, that ChatGPT using GPT-4 on ChatGPT Plus could probably generate memes that were high quality. And if that's wrong, then I think that will come within 6 months. I think we're at a stage where it's, I think generally ChatGPT understands humor pretty well, especially GPT-4. And so I think it understands well enough. And let's say, even maybe if you go after an area like finance, right? It's higher, more affluent, but also smarter people. Same with software engineers. So maybe you want to target a middle market type, meme marketing business. So you're going after pet owners. You're going after, some vast middle swath of Americans, sort of middle of the run, middle wealth, middle intelligence level. And I think ChatGPT understands that type of humor pretty well. So I don't know. I mean, if anything, maybe you run into the limits of ChatGPT's like offensiveness. It can't generate that offensive of content, so maybe that's the real limitation here. GPT-4 through the API can generate more offensive content, but then you can't. I don't know if you still have access to the plugin. I'm a little bit curious how that would work, but I think there's something you could do there. I think you could probably you could find some niche where you could reliably generate content, memes that were, say, at least like 2/3 of them were funny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I also think you could probably get analytics data and engagement data and train it and say, okay, these were the types of memes that work. Continue pumping those ones out. So I think any concerns I have, at least right now, for how good or bad the quality would be, I think eventually that's gonna go away, right? Where it just has so much data and knows what people like, that it just continues to be able to crank those out, which is equally impressive and scary.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's its own business idea there. You make a GPT,
a meme generator,
a generator, yeah, a transformer that's not just images specifically, but more specific. Your Mid Journey, but for memes. That I honestly like. That's probably a niche business just right there.
I feel like I would expand that to like running all of your social media, because it seems like a waste to not also have it create posts and measure those posts.
True.
And
We could start it at meme marketing.
And then expand
make
from
a
there.
meme. Yeah, exactly. Like, hey, we'll create an Instagram account for you, and we'll generate all the meme marketing for a given niche. Generate all funny meme images, generate the corresponding captions in whatever style. Use the analytics, feed that back into it to refine it, and I think you could probably just take. Honestly, I think you could probably just take Midjourney's sort of exact playbook. You could, and you don't even have to incentivize people to give you ratings, right? Midjourney actually gives you a discount, or they give you, I think it's like the top 1,000 raters every day. They give you like a free hour of GPU time. So it's not really worth it. I mean, because it's $4 per hour of GPU time. So unless your time is worth very little, and it doesn't really make sense to try to go after that. But they're trying to get ratings, and so you wouldn't really have to do that. Imagine if you just took a GPT system, a text to image system, you trained it purely on memes, all the
Yeah.
memes from Reddit, from Twitter, from Instagram, and you, yeah, honestly, I think that's a great idea. You should do
Well, say I'm a business and I'm trying to engage in this. You're selling me on it. Say I own, I'm selling cars or something like that. Are you going to try to drill down to my local area or just like general car enthusiasts and have a bunch of different meme accounts that are just building up followers and somehow funneling to my car business? Or how do you see kind of that business working and the flow?
It could be, yeah, it could be a bunch of different accounts. You could also concentrate on a single account, So I think I think it's Law Bulldog or Bulldog Law. I'm not sure if you've seen this Instagram account.
No.
Um, I think he's a personal injury lawyer in New York, and his Instagram account is, I want to say, more than 1 million followers, and he posts just memes mostly about law, and that attracts this massive audience, and that's his primary marketing channel, as far as I can tell. I mean, I haven't looked extensively into him. I know he has some billboards as well, but I think the Instagram is a huge piece of his marketing. So you could pursue something like that where, and I think again, some of it depends on the exactly what niche you're in, right? So how how much trust is involved for law. I think there's a lot of trust that's involved.
Mhm.
I think this probably would be optimal for smaller, medium ticket items rather than very large ticket items, because I think then the tolerance for lower quality memes is higher. Also, there's almost like a generational shift for people who were alive during the beginning of the internet period are have like a slightly higher, like they appreciate higher quality images, and then
Mhm.
it's like come full circle back where now sort of young Gen Z and even younger appreciate terrible quality images because they're so already exposed to like just really nice CGI that like the crappy images do something.
Are funnier to them.
Exactly. So I think that's sort of the sweet spot. You want to go after something that's like not that expensive. Right. If I created this business, I would target those types of customers, like businesses that were selling to, say, I mean, you could even sell kids products maybe, or something like 15 to 20-year olds. So not something super expensive, but something in that age range. You create a bunch of crappy internet memes, and then
Do you think that memes as a marketing method has like remaining lifespan left on it?
oh yeah, I think
Yeah.
we've just entered
It-
that stage. If you think about it,
that's
right, it's just an extension of humor. Like
totally.
humor has always been a part of marketing, or at least for decades. It has been a part of marketing for many decades, um, or a century, dare I say. Like there's been like humor is an important part of many marketing campaigns, and memes are just an internet packaging of humor. So I think
Totally.
that's here to stay. Um, you know, Images, GIFs, like I would say memes have moved more now from just images to short form videos and GIFs.
Yeah.
And that's also why the text to video system, the plugin was interesting. But yeah, I think it's here to stay. I don't see that going anywhere.
Yeah, I think like humor connects you to a person or even a company if it is something that like speaks to you, right? If you laugh at something, it's going to make you feel good. Those natural feelings of goodness are going to connect you a little bit more to that person or company.
Exactly.
Um, but I do like the way I think of it is like when you first had an Instagram account, you could create a page and just post a bunch of like pretty girls and you'd get a ton of following, right? And that's sort of died out in a way. I mean, there's still definitely influencers who are just posting, pics of themselves and getting a big following. But I liken it to kind of that lawyer example where is it still super feasible to amass like 1 million followers just solely based off of memes? I question that that is still as lucrative or as valuable of a marketing method. But I could be totally off base, and I know you do this today, so it could be still super useful. But it's just interesting because I think there are like life cycles to marketing, and it just feels like memes have been kind of a mainstay for a while, and I wonder how long it's going to take for people to get more and more desensitized to it to the point where it's having the opposite of the intended effect.
So I think you're definitely right. I think there is a desensitization effect, or rather, I think the ability to use it is lower. But I'm not sure that actually is from a desensitization effect or that's just
I
from an
just want to go
increased.
back. When you say use it, what do you mean?
So
Like
let's say,
use the
right,
following you game?
meme-based marketing. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know
Oh,
if meme-based, I think meme-based marketing is less effective possibly than it used to be. Um, but that I think is mostly due to increased competition. So for
mm,
example, I still follow a lot of meme pages. Um, it's entertaining. I'm not going to stop following those. And when I discover a new one that's like good, I still follow it. Um, but there are a lot more. So the proportion, right? Like I follow X percent of meme pages, 5 years ago, and now the denominator is much larger. So I
mm.
follow, 1/1 millionth of that percentage now, just because the competition is higher. So I think that is definitely a big factor. Um, and I think there's also something to the quality aspect, right? Like I'm saying, I think you could produce a lot of memes this way. I don't know if that lasts for. I mean, I guess it's sort of a race, right? Like people are going to get desensitized to like the same quality, and they're going to look for something like more personal or more witty, and it'll sort of be like a race between AI, how fast it gets good at that versus how fast people get desensitized to the current level. So that will be interesting.
Well, I do wonder if that's something that can just kind of be ever evolving. If I, as the person inputting the prompt, can recognize a trend that, hey, the current state of AI generation and how people are interacting with memes is not working, well, I could try to see what does work. And I could start inputting prompts that generate something that might kind of buck the trend of what's currently going on. And maybe I strike a gold mine, right? And maybe that's sort of a kind of infinite loop where things are continuously changing and improving, and you as kind of the prompt engineer are the one that has to like find the gold nuggets in all the noise.
Yeah, I think that is going to be true to a degree, especially because I think that's actually going to be true of every type of AI marketing, because if you eliminate the barriers to a given type of content generation, because you can entirely automate it with AI, then you're just going to blow it up, right? Like, I mean,
Yep.
you already have a lot of SEO spam now in terms of blogs, and if GPT gets good enough that it can write every sort of blog article as good or better than a human can, then we would just have, you know, 100 million times more of that. And we have the same amount of human attention to go around. So that's going to clearly decrease the effectiveness of that marketing channel on average. And I think that's going to apply across the board. So I think there's going to be an arbitrage period of sort of as this thing gets interesting, like right now, if you're an early adopter and you start creating, mass content that's of decent quality with AI, then I think you can benefit from that a lot. But I do think that will come, like I don't think the method overall will just become less effective. I just think that the competition will increase so dramatically that eventually you'll have to change what you're doing to keep your
Yeah.
business working.
Interesting. Do you have anything else on the videos that you showed and AI meme generation, or because I did want to start to move on, but I don't want to step on your toes with any of this.
No, let's move on. So another interesting thing that I saw trending on Twitter was Chain GPT, which is exactly a business like trying to jump on the bandwagon here of AI tools. Um, and it basically looks like complete and utter hogwash. Like, yeah, it was trending with quite a lot of volume on Twitter earlier today, And yet I played with it. So it's what it purports to be is an AI expert on blockchain. So it's like they took a GPT model, trained it on some crypto stuff and blockchain stuff, and then they're like, hey, ask your crypto questions here, generate your smart contracts, etc. But I played with it and I asked it to answer various questions that I also asked to ChatGPT, and almost every time, sometimes they were about the same quality answer, but most of the time, ChatGPT was substantially better at answering the questions. So it's kind of
What?
like an interesting example of just people trying to like jump on the bandwagon of AI and GPT and like creating this product, and it has its own cryptocurrency, and they're like,
That's
buy
how
the
you know
crypto.
it's hogwash.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
like, buy the cryptocurrency to use the AI system. And actually, how I knew it was hogwash is I just looked at the landing page, and it's too broad. It's like, we're for these people, or for unlimited use cases for individuals, businesses,
Unlimited use
developers,
cases. Yeah, that's
organizations. And then they're like, hey, we can do trading analytics and trading signals, answer all blockchain questions, and this it's like very distinct types of things. I'm like, let's just look at this here, because there's a lot of people talking about this and it seems just like such nonsense, and indeed it is nonsense.
yeah. No, that's ridiculous. I do want to ask, unless you have anything else on that,
No,
if
go ahead.
you had seen the defamation lawsuit. I don't want to butcher the exact case that happened, but I think it was a Finnish somebody in government potentially, or maybe Australian, and yeah, they raised a defamation lawsuit because somebody input a prompt and it gave false information about this person. That was
Interesting.
like damning information, like maybe
Interesting.
like an assault or something when they didn't actually have that on the record, something like that.
So I don't know if this is what you're talking about. I don't know if this was Finnish. I for some reason was thinking this was the US, although I'm not sure that I ever actually read this was in the US. I did see something about a professor that was,
It might have been that.
yeah, like
I could
somebody
have
asked
that information
about,
on.
but I think, yeah, I think the situation I saw was like a journalist was exploring it. I don't know if there was any lawsuit involved, so maybe this is a different case. But
Hmm.
um, yeah, there was some journalist that was using ChatGPT and asked it about sexual assault, and it provided an example that included the name of a
The
professor and an
professor.
entire like
Yeah.
fake news story about that professor. And then apparently Bard somehow read the result of that. So I'm not sure if someone posted the output of that
Yeah.
ChatGPT prompt, but somehow Bard found that and then uh, elaborated on it further.
Oh my God.
So there was this
Poor
just
guy.
entire like fake train of information that was created about this poor professor who had never done anything, and so and then the professor ended up finally writing a blog article about it.
Saying, "Hey, I didn't do this stuff."
Yeah, and also just
Like, come
talking
on.
about GPT, the limits of it, and it is amazing like how much it hallucinates information. Like I was playing with Bard a lot last week, and I think Bard hallucinates more information than ChatGPT does, quite a bit so. But they both do it, and it's yeah, it's amazing how well it bullshits, because when I was working at the legal tech startup in Seattle, um, one thing that I did not like was that there were certain people at the company, in management, who I was part of the reason I eventually ended up leaving, who seemed to prioritize just having an answer over having the right answer. And
Hmm.
so we had this too long daily meeting, and people would show what they were working on, and the people who came very quickly with answers that were like, hey, put together this thing, like that was sort of like what was incentivized. And so they're like, get something fast, come forward, which is, speed is valuable, and you don't need to be perfect in startup land by any means. But sometimes you have to like you still have to do some sort of comparison between speed and quality. Like
Yep.
speed is better than quality in many situations to a degree, but at some point you need some amount of quality. And if that ratio of quality to speed is too low, which it can get too low, then you just end up with you know not nothing useful, right? Like you just end up not really doing much. So I think that unfortunately, like there's a lot of people who prefer that fast answer to a correct answer, and may not know exactly where that ratio should be of speed to correctness. And I think a lot of people will just take the speed, like regardless of how correct it is. So
And so
as long as it's fast and it just gives me an answer, like any answer that sounds good and is given to me fast, I'm just going to take that as truth, which is
and so
unfortunate.
you're relating this back to Bard and GPT
In
and
terms of,
what
I think it's problematic because it generates answers that sound good and it gives it to you very fast. And I'm not really
yeah,
sure how that ends up playing out because I think it's probably a significant percentage of people that will just take things at
face
face
value.
value if you give them an answer fast that sounds logical. And so I'm not sure like how that problem gets solved. Is it eventually we just build in safeguards into ChatGPT and Bard and these other large language models so that they hallucinate less information? Um, is that possible to, really eliminate all of that? Even if you get rid of specific examples, right? Like you could train it to double check, or you could put external constraints on it, but it double checks all names against
Hmm.
external data. You could,
But how do you know it can trust that external data?
yeah. I mean that's a fair point, but even putting that point aside, suppose we had a verifiable source that could be checked. It still is kind of problematic because there's a lot of information, like language models, right? They're generating responses to sort of arbitrary questions, and a lot of that is going to just be like perspective, and a perspective can be hallucinated as easy as a fact can, but
Totally.
it's much harder to detect. And so I'm not sure if we come up with just better safeguards that are, sort of how OpenAI is already trying to like impose ethics rules on it.
Right.
So can you just continue down that same trend and eventually get some sort of large language model that doesn't really hallucinate as much? Or do you need something else? Or does it just not really get addressed? Like,
Well, I think we talked about this a little bit on our first episode where we're concerned about the fact that if I'm inputting a prompt, I'm expecting GPT to give me one single response, right? And that's mostly, unless I ask for multiple answers, that's what I'm getting, right? Whereas with Google, you're searching for the answer instead of being given it. And Google is not necessarily looked at as an authority. It tries to do its best to give you the best results it can, but you're the one seeking out and searching that information, right? And so when I put in a prompt with GPT, I give it some level of authority and have that singular answer context, right? And I do think what's going to end up happening is yes, we're probably going to get better with it not hallucinating, random information. I think maybe there's also something where there's a warning. It's like, hey, we can't verify that all the information in this answer is accurate. Something like that would help. And I think also it might just be part of like the human zeitgeist, right? Where people understand that they're asking this prompt, and the information they get back might not be necessarily be fact. I hope that that's the case, but I don't know how much I trust people to to actually recognize that. But I do think, and that's also something I want to touch on, is the fact that Italy, I believe, banned it, and I think it was
yeah,
for this reason, right? Because of misinformation and some of the dangers around that, right?
yep.
I don't want to talk out of turn, yeah. So, I wonder if we're going to see more of that happening as it's still in its infancy and things are trying to mature, right?
Yeah, I mean, in the US, I'm not sure how you would do that because you would run into free speech issues. I mean, maybe not because there's some, commercial speech is not covered by the First Amendment, but it's hard to imagine ChatGPT or being banned or any LLM being banned for providing fake information. If
Hmm.
anything, maybe more pressure would be put onto distributors. Um, and in fact, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, so if I want to make a prediction, I think the TCPA, which is the Telephone Communications Protection Act, maybe, um, the TCPA has been sort of turned and I'm going to say weaponized, but it's weaponized defensively into much more than it sort of was initially proposed for. And so the TCPA has been used now in recent years to defend against robocalls and spam
Mm.
texts. And so you still get probably a lot of spam calls, a lot of spam texts, but that has been diminishing, and it is better than it would be without that act. So basically, that act gives regulators pretty broad powers in the U.S. to block certain things. So I think one of the, I'm not sure if this has passed yet or if this is still just being proposed, but um, there was not a bill, but a set of regulations that would effectively um, allow or require telecom carriers to block transmissions from any number that was suspected of transmitting spam. So they're required to like monitor the types of traffic coming through. This is sort of like emails. Like emails are also regulated, and obviously people still get a ton of spam, so it's again not perfect. But yeah, both email and phone are regulated by different agencies. And I think the TCPA may end up being used also to regulate some parts of the transmission of information created by AI. So if nothing else, I think it'll be used certainly to, even just in its current incarnation, to block things like AI generated robocalls to a degree. So I don't think we'll necessarily see as much proliferation of spam there as we could. And also, I wonder if something similar, either the TCPA or I'm not sure if this would fall under their purview, but like posting things to social media, right? I think fake news generated by AI, and sort of at scale, either the TCPA or something analogous, maybe that'll get broadened, maybe a new act will be created that's sort of modeled after it, may get put forward that will sort of damp down, probably not eliminate, but at least damp down on the amount of fake information that gets put out that way.
I will say that scares me a little bit. I mean, in theory, it is a great thing, right? But
I agree. It
those
also scares
systems
me.
can always be gamed, you know?
It can be gamed. It's a blurry sort of line. People can be accidentally blocked. That we already had an issue like that. In regards to Facebook, there were a bunch of real people who ended up getting blocked because Facebook thought they were Russian bots and they were not Russian bots. So obviously, some false positives occur, and that is unfortunate because that does, and especially like the First Amendment was created to protect free speech, and so free speech about politics above all else. Like that is the most core part of free speech. Like we want to protect the ability to have a political debate, and so for Facebook to block people thinking they're bots and they're just trying to express their real, genuine political views is pretty unfortunate. And so that definitely does seem like a risk of these types of regulations. But it also it's hard to like come up with a better solution, because like you imagine, if I can just mass produce infinite content at scale and distribute it, like how else do I just prevent people from becoming like deluged in like a wave of just artificial propaganda without some type of control over the transmission mechanisms? Like government tends to regulate middlemen, like middlemen companies, because it's efficient. So we regulate spam through telecom companies. We regulate finance through banks or investment brokers, right? Those intermediary entities. So yeah, it's tough. Like I see those middle entities probably becoming more regulated. I don't know if there's good and bad aspects to that, but I honestly don't know what else, like, what are the other alternatives that you can do?
So you think OpenAI or regulations coming for OpenAI and the like?
I don't know if it'll come to OpenAI though, is my point. I think it may come to other companies. So like social media companies where people share things, companies that transmit information, the middleware companies of the internet. It could come
they're transmitting information, right? Wouldn't you consider that?
Yes, but I more mean as a third party, right? So I'm a third party, I'm a neutral third party. I'm transmitting information from A to B and I'm C. So I think those C's, those will be regulated probably the most, because that's just historically how the US tends to regulate industries. There will also be regulations on A, but I think that will be more in lines with existing copyright law,
Okay.
at least in the US, because we have
Yeah.
those speech protections.
Yeah, I don't know like that there is a one size fits all solution for something like that that's that important, right? Because yeah, on one hand you could say, hey, there's freedom of speech and you should be able to say whatever you want. On the other hand, you have people who are actively trying to, ruin our democracy and planning attacks. And I don't know that those laws were thought of and enacted in a way that was really thinking of the possibility that something like that could happen on such a large scale. So it's like, where do you find that middle ground? Is there a middle ground? Is it binary where it's like, okay, it's like all or nothing? Or is there just some regulation and people just have to deal with it? Like, you're never going to satisfy everyone, right?
Yeah. I bet we'd definitely be on the regulation. I think it's going to be regulation of middle companies. It's my main prediction of how that turns out.
Not the boldest prediction I've ever heard you say, but
But
I'll
specifically middle
agree with that.
countries, middle companies. That's the aspect, the key part of this
Okay.
prediction, right? It's not going to be OpenAI that's overly regulated or Google. It's going to be maybe Google's like search part, but I think it's going to be the companies that transmit information as third parties that are going to be regulated the most. So that would
I,
be, yeah, like maybe wireless providers. It'll be telecom companies. It will be um, social media companies, and messaging apps potentially. That's where I
I
think it'll.
think I think you're giving our lawmakers too much credit, because I think nothing like this has happened in history, right? In terms of AI being such a dominant topic and able to do so much, and it's only going to get better. And I think as it continues to get better, there's going to be more and more fear and more fear mongering around OpenAI, and it's most likely going to be uh, targeted specifically at OpenAI because of how far along they are right now. But I think it's inevitable where that conversation gets so loud to the point that a lawmaker is going to try to do something, whether it's justified or really just a ploy to get somewhere higher. I think they are going to go after OpenAI, and I think that's going to be the first target. But maybe it does end up shaking out where it's mostly middlemen being the most regulated. But I do see them going after them first for sure. So
Right, and
I'll
what
vote.
type of regulation do you think they'll impose?
That's a good question. I think they'll try to regulate like the types of answers they're giving. I think I would go back to having some sort of disclaimer that, hey, the information, we can't verify that this information is accurate. Although, like, I feel like if
That sort of goes back to the copyright issue, though, right? So I'm saying I think copyright law will be heavily enforced on the AI generators. Um, and what you're describing would be smart business, honestly, for OpenAI to just do now. And actually, they do, actually, right? If you go to the bottom, somewhere on the ChatGPT screen, it says something like, "This is experimental. Don't trust everything that we say." So that
mm,
disclosure is there, and I think the big part of that is that they're trying to at least reduce slightly the copyright liability and the defamation liability. Like, those are existing things, right? Like copyright, defamation. I think those will be hugely important areas. Like, if you want to be a lawyer in the next 10 years, 10, 15 years, like if you're just coming out of law school or just going into law school, like, specialize in copyright or defamation law, because that's probably going to be a huge area.
yeah, and I am interested because I guess I think of ChatGPT the most I consider it similar to Google, where it's you're inputting a prompt, you're getting some sort of data or answer back. And so I do know that Google is regulated in some way, but I think it's mostly around like data privacy. I don't think
Yeah.
they necessarily regulate like their search results. And so maybe I am wrong in the fact that you know a, a prompt answer is very similar to a search result answer, and since those aren't really regulated, maybe
Well,
what ChatGPT is
there
going
is
to
a
do.
critical difference there, right? Like, ChatGPT definitely has a lot more liability than Google, because Google is protected under Section 230. And it's interesting. There's all this talk, right, about like trying to reform Section 230. Like, for years, there's been a sort of like a gradually growing voice of dissent amongst politicians who don't
Real
like the
quick
way.
for people like me who don't know Section 230, can you explain that?
Yes, so Section 230 is like the cornerstone regulation of the internet. It basically says that if you are an internet service provider who, so you provide some interface on the internet, and you are just allowing third parties to post content. So that could be an old school like message board. It could be Reddit, any other social media. It can be Google search, anywhere. So Google provides search results. Those search results are provided by other people. YouTube provides videos produced by other people. Twitter provides tweets produced by other people. Reddit provides posts and comments produced by other people. All of those systems, Section 230 says the company that posts all those does not have liability for those. So that is hugely important. It was, produced 25 years ago, basically in response to lawsuits over, the Wolf of Wall Street movie.
Yeah.
So there was like people pushing stocks on like some internet message board, and the internet message board got sued, and I think they lost the lawsuit, although I'd have to double check that. And then Congress was like, whoa, we don't know if we like this. I'm not sure that the message board was liable. Maybe we should make some law that like assigns liability just to the people who are posting. Otherwise, this is going to be a serious damper on innovation. And so they created Section 230, which says exactly that. Like basically these tech companies that just post third-party content are not liable for that third-party content. And that is a huge, huge barrier. Like it's a huge piece of the internet that allows companies like tech companies to work the way they do. And ChatGPT does not have that. It's the first like really huge internet native company that does not have that, because they are generating the content directly. So they have no Section 230 protection, which is very
Even though that
fascinating.
generation's happening based off of other content?
Yeah, because they're generating it, right? They trained it on other content, but they're not just reproducing that content. Like they are making their own content. It's just, it's no different as if like I can read 3 articles and then reword them in my own voice, and then now that's my content. And similarly for the ChatGPT is generating its own content. So it's sort of interesting that like at the same time as these politicians have been like getting increasingly uncomfortable with Section 230, it started, I can't remember which side really started it, but like Republicans are unhappy with Section 230 because it allows social media companies to censor things without being liable for it. And so they, a lot of Republicans have claimed that it's being unfairly used to censor Republican voices. And Democrats are somewhat unhappy with it because they think it allows tech companies to grow too large. So there's been sort of a growing discomfort with it on both sides, and like more push towards potentially repealing or probably not repealing, but it'll probably be maybe amending Section 230. And it will be kind of interesting to see if like that comes too late, because the internet starts to shift to this other model of AI generative content, and generative content in any form is not covered by that. So Midjourney, ChatGPT, none of these are covered by Section 230.
That fascinates me, and I feel like maybe other people wouldn't find it interesting, but I think that maybe there's some small episode we can do on that, because I would love to like understand more about the legality of it and how it might affect OpenAI and other similar AI generative content.
The huge risk that they have it doesn't exist, at the same point when Google was being born, that, I guess maybe Google was born technically, I'm not sure what year was Google formed in.
I think it was like, it couldn't have been early 2000s.
I was thinking it was early 2000s, but then I know, Sergey and them were writing papers in the 90s. So I won't say that, but I will say, with Facebook, I'll go with Facebook. Facebook definitely was formed in a post-Section 230 world. So with all the other drama that Facebook went through, they did not have to deal with massive legal risk of the same scale. OpenAI, Midjourney do. They have this huge additional risk that exists beyond any of the tech companies that were started in the early 2000s.
So I'm curious, you don't think that there's a possibility, well, I guess there's always a possibility, but that these are kind of the MySpaces
I think they're the
current AI?
Netscapes, or like not even like the more like the Napster, sorry. Right?
Yeah,
I think some of
interesting.
these are like I think Midjourney is probably Napster.
Why do you think that?
Because it's playing fast and loose with the law, just blatantly violating copyright law, and I think they're going to get whammed for it.
But do you think that there's a certain threshold of users that they can have to where that maybe makes it a little bit harder to do that? Like Napster, I think did have a lot of users, but I don't think it had tens or hundreds of millions to the point where like if you just
Midjourney
take
doesn't have
that
hundreds of millions yet. They're still much smaller than ChatGPT.
if they opened it up, I'm sure they would, right? So
Yeah, I mean, they also have to charge more for it, right? Like they're sort of don't have as large of a war chest as OpenAI does.
but also, like a lot of these seem interchangeable. Would you disagree? Like when you say Mid Journey, I think they have the same burden that a Chat GPT does as well.
Same burden legally, or
Legally,
yeah. I mean, there's probably some differences, different media forms. I think I'm honestly, I'm not sure I can quantify which is more the legal liability of text or the legal liability of images. You're violating copyright on both sides, but
right?
maybe one is easier to prove or the scale is there. But I think both of them are clearly massive liabilities. And I think probably like Adobe Firefly is basically Midjourney, but trained on properly licensed images, and it kind of sucks in comparison. But I think that will get better. And so I would bet that sort of we migrate to that model because everybody thought that pirating was just here to stay. Like Napster was like, that's not gonna come down. Like it's a different era. Like now it's the internet. Like it's not the same laws that apply. And then they got whammed. And then similar thing with crypto. People were, even just like 3 years ago, a lot of people were like, hey, it's crypto. It's not finance. Like securities laws, those don't apply to us. Like commodities laws, like I mean, no, like we have to innovate here. And then now there's just, lawsuit after lawsuit, wave after wave, like going down for crypto. And so I think like the laws still apply. Like copyright laws still applied to Napster. Finance, securities and commodities laws still applied to crypto. And again, copyright laws are still going to apply to generative AI. And so I think those will get hit. I don't know how long it's going to take. Regulators tend to operate on a 1 to 2 year lag. So based on the fact that ChatGPT sort of exploded, December of 2022, Midjourney really is only this spring. So maybe it's, sometime 2024, 2025, 2026. In those years, I would expect to start seeing more large scale lawsuits. It's also not regulators, so it's a little bit different, right? We're really waiting for like class actions probably, or
Right.
large companies that have serious drops in market cap that then sue, right? So maybe Getty Images sues a bunch of people who, maybe Getty Images sues Midjourney, something like that, or some coalition of publishers. Maybe Google sues OpenAI over on behalf of all their small bloggers whose content was read by GPT, something like that.
I can definitely see that happening. Although you're saying they're going to be doing it on behalf of, right? Not.
I'm just thinking it's sort of legal minutia of like how these things are going to be structured because it's sort of difficult to show in certain like situations when something copyrighted has been ripped off. So for Midjourney, right, I can ask it for an image of a Pokemon, or a Mario in Mario Kart, and it will give me a very good rendering of those, which are intellectually property protected, characters. So it can't do that. It shouldn't be doing that, but it does. So, the owners of those intellectual property, those gaming companies, can go after Midjourney for violating intellectual property rights, basically. But that's sort of niche, right? A lot of images, like you think about a small photographer who put up 10,000 images of nature on as stock photos somewhere, and then Midjourney trained on those without proper licensing. This is a hypothetical, right? And then those 10,000 images, like it's just of nature, right? Like how do you actually show that it's just a bunch of trees and mountains and stuff? Like how are you really going to show that those were the same images? It's not as easy to identify. So I think there's going to be the majority of copyright infringement is going to be in situations like that. So you're going to have to aggregate into some sort of class action or some sort of very large players who have distinct pieces of intellectual property or can like sort of act on behalf of people that, smaller partners they work with. Maybe you have a social media company, maybe Instagram sues Midjourney for looking at a bunch of Instagram images and not using them according to their terms of service, something like that.
Yeah, that I mean we have dove pretty deep into it, so I don't know how much more there is to touch on in regards to this topic, but I wouldn't mind, just getting into the legality of it and what the landscape might look like, a year, 2 years, 3 years down the line, both in terms of the lawsuits that come out and then just the AI landscape in general at that point. Um, but I do have a question for you. Have you ever seen Black Mirror?
Yes.
Do you know the episode where it was like the robotic killing killer dogs? Like
It's been a while since I watched Black Mirror. It doesn't ring
well,
a bell.
do you remember the MI or do you know the MIT robots, the ones that look like
Yeah.
those little
Yep.
so
Or the
I
Boston
saw
Dynamics ones.
yes.
Yep.
Sorry, yeah, Boston Dynamics. Is that not anyway? So I saw a video of one that looked very much like that. That was going around very meticulously cleaning up somebody's apartment, and I was like, I need this
Yeah,
right away.
that's exactly what I was thinking. I need that.
Exactly. So I saw that, and it was doing such a good job. And I do wonder. I didn't, dive, too deep down the rabbit hole. But you had sent me the object scanning, and I was wondering if it had used anything around that technology, and just in terms of like figuring out what objects are what and like where to put stuff. Because it was super interesting. It was getting very detailed around like what it could get, and it was getting stuff that was like right next to it and picking it up and putting it in the right spots. So
So
I need one of
maybe
those.
we
And
should even like make this an episode in itself of like
yeah,
AI applications in robotics, because it's sort of a different flavor than the generative technologies that we've been talking about lately.
yeah,
Um, Basically, to give you a preview for future episode here, maybe the next episode. Um, there was a paper that I sent Matt that is basically a development that is significantly better image segmentation. So recognizing precisely like what an object is in an image. And this is a very old problem, but it's also a very core problem to almost any sort of robotic application, because if you have a robot that's trying to work in a warehouse setting and pick items and put items back and pack items into a box and put boxes and pack boxes into trucks, um, those all require the ability to recognize objects in various configurations and various shapes. And so that, being able to really recognize an object, a three-dimensional object, recognize what its shape is in 3 dimensions, map your gripper onto that object and then manipulate it, is a very key problem. And even, I think years ago, before OpenAI was really well known by a lot of people, and it was just still a nerd thing.
I think it's still a nerd
They
thing.
introduced the like OpenAI Gym, or I forget what they called it, but it was something Gym. But it was basically like a reinforcement learning system where they trained in a virtual reality like robotic hands to manipulate objects, and then after they trained this for like millions of GPU hours, they then had a robotic hand which could manipulate objects in a better way. And so this is sort of another piece of that puzzle in terms of robots using AI to manipulate real world objects. Yeah, I think we
Yeah,
should have a whole episode probably about that.
right, exactly. And I don't know whether that robot was using that technology, but I imagine in some way it was. And so I would love to you just give a sneak peek to one of our future episodes for sure. I'd love to dive deep and learn a little bit more about that. But I think we're probably roughly towards the end here. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about or touch on?
I think let's save it for next time. If you guys have any opinions, if you want to hear more about the additional legal and regulatory stuff, leave a comment. If you want to hear more about robots and AI use cases in robots, leave a comment. Or if there's something else that you want to hear about, leave a comment.
And if you want to sign a petition for us to get access to plugins, developer access, that'd be great. We'd love that.
Yeah, start drafting letters. Make it handwritten so that it's
Make sure it's angry.
yeah, angry handwritten letters, and include pictures of your angry face, and mail them to OpenAI.
Love that.
We'll leave the address in the comment. No, just kidding.
All right. See you guys.